Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's edition, I want to cover what a lot of you guys might have been hearing about in the cycling web pages, and of course reading a ton about when you're looking over at cycling news and you're seeing all these articles about this one cycling project. Now, from everything I've read, it looks like there's 8 cycling teams involved, and maybe some of the organizers out there are trying to get a little bit invested in it too. But we're talking about trying to raise enough money where they can put together their own calendar. The problem is when you start looking at things this way is it's going to change the calendar the way that we have seen it. Now they talk about bringing in a bunch of the favorites and forcing all the top guns to really be at the same event at the same time. I don't really know if I need that in my life. At this moment, the cycling history over the European peloton, it has a flow that I'm used to, right? You start beginning the season at Paris-Nice, Trino Adriatico. You have races like Strade Bianche that's gaining a lot of popularity. And then you start really getting into the classics with Milan San Remo. Of course, Paris-Roubaix, the GC guys over doing the Basque Country. And then, of course, we have that build-up all the way into June. And then once June finishes, we got the Tour de France that starts, the big main be-all, end-all bike race when we're talking about the world of cycling. Now, what they're talking about is changing the calendar and making it where you have all the best riders racing at the same events all the time. I don't know if I need that. I mean, we start looking at last year's season. I kind of enjoyed seeing Primoz Roglic go over to the Giro d'Italia and win over there. And of course, he had to go against Remco Evenepoel for the first 10 stages there until Remco Evenepoel left with COVID. But he still had a great battle, of course, with Geraint Thomas, who held the pink jersey all the way until the penultimate individual time trial where Primoz Roglic's form came back to 100%, and then we saw the Slovenian win the Giro d'Italia. Okay, we look at other places where we saw Tadej Pogačar winning at Paris-Nice and beating Jonas Vingegaard. At this moment, when you have 4 top riders like we have for this 2024 season with Remco, Primoz, Tadej, and of course with Jonas Vingegaard, they're going to overlap somewhere. At times, would I like to see them maybe once or twice, all 4 get together? Sure, that'd be fun, but I don't need to see it throughout the whole season. And when you start looking at this one project and we start reading over this article here in Cycling News, when you get down there to Eusebio, the director sportif for Movistar, he puts out some ridiculous things in the article about talking about shorting the Grand Tours. Well, if you shorten the Grand Tour, Eusebio, it's not a Grand Tour, okay? When he's talking about changing a Grand Tour from 21 stages to 15, you're no longer doing a Grand Tour. So if you win the Giro, if you win the Tour de France, and you win the Tour of Spain, and say you won all 3 of them, you didn't win 3 Grand Tours. You won 0 Grand Tours because they're 15 days, not 21. Now, a lot of times you hear commentators, and they make this mistake all the time. I remember hearing Bob Roll for Peacock when he's talking about the women's cycling. He was talking about the women doing their Grand Tours at Giro and France and Spain. Women don't do Grand Tours. They don't do Grand Tours because they don't race 21 stages. What makes it remarkable if Tadej Pogačar in 2024 wins the Giro and then wins the Tour de France is that he's won 2 Grand Tours back to back. What makes that so special is that they're 21 days of racing, and that is what makes it hard. If we look at the history of the Tour de France and other Grand Tours, the drama is built up all the way to the last day because anyone can crack. If it's a 10-day or 7-day stage race, if it's a week-long stage race, most likely top riders don't crack. But once you start going over 10 days, over 15, deep into the 3rd week, that's when riders start cracking. Remember the 2020 Tour de France with Tadej Pogačar winning on the penultimate time trial? If I take you back to stage 19 when Primoz Roglic was wearing the race leader's yellow jersey there at the Tour de France, if we had ended that Tour de France, Primoz Roglic would have himself a Tour de France victory and Tadej Pogačar would have been 2nd. Instead, we got one of the greatest bike races ever in 2020 at that Tour de France when they went up Planche de Belfi and Tadej Pogačar destroyed Primoz Roglic on that stage to get the race leader's yellow jersey. That is the most amazing thing about Grand Tours and why they should never be touched. Why you would see an article put in there from Movistar about talking about shortening Grand Tours so that everyone can race multiple ones. Well, they're not Grand Tours anymore, so you haven't done anything except for destroyed what's already history making when riders can win a Giro, follow that up with a Tour de France, and if someone could win the triple, I mean, how impressed were we last season when Jumbo-Visma won all three with 3 different riders? That was a remarkable feat, and it's never been done before. That's what made it special. If we change it to 15 days, it's not going to be that special. And then we see the next thing there from Eusebio, and he starts talking about wanting to do replacement riders. Replacement riders? How can you replace riders in a Grand Tour or any bike race for that matter? What starts to happen when you replace riders is now all of a sudden, let's say, well, we have Tadej Pogacar wins the Giro d'Italia, and his director sportif comes up to him because he knows he can replace riders at the Tour de France. He goes, Tadej, instead of 5 weeks off, we're going to give you 6 weeks before you have to start the Tour de France. And instead of racing 3 weeks, we're going to make it so you come in at the end of the first week, miss all the flat, crazy, technical, dangerous, most dangerous sections of the Tour de France is always the first week. You don't have to worry about that first week. We're going to bring you in on the second week. Come on. You can't have replacement riders. The most beautiful thing about sports in general, fans, when we're sitting there and we're all fans sitting on the Chesterfield at home watching it, is those highs and lows. I love it when the lows are there too. I love it when a rider's failed. I love it when that same rider has won. I love it when the drama has been brought into it where a team has been devastated. Maybe they lost 4 or 5 riders. I finished the Tour de France with multiple riders gone off my team many times when the bus was like a ghost. I mean, it was like just empty in the bus. We lost so many riders. And then if that same team that loses those kind of riders and then all of a sudden they win a stage or win 2 stages, that is another high that brings you up. That's the beautiful thing about sitting back and watching as a fan are the highs and lows. And as a rider myself, back in the day, I'm telling you, when you crashed out, the lows were huge, but then when you recovered from that crash and you got it going again, it was high. Now, Eusebio, he wants to talk about changing and being able to replace riders because he's looking at it from a sponsorship point aside where like they've spent millions of dollars coming in. If you spent millions of dollars coming in and the team failed, it failed. Wait till next year. It brings the drama up. It lifts everybody up. Right now when we see Enric Mas from Movistar, and we know he crashed out of the Tour de France last year early, stage 1, we know that the drama there and the pressure on him to perform at this year's Tour de France is going to be high. We know as fans sitting on the Chesterfield that if Enric Mas was to win a stage, go in and win the general classification, if Movistar was to come back from the devastating ashes that they've had the last few seasons, then that high is what's going to lift us up. That is what makes it so special. But when we're talking about one director changing and putting replacement riders in there and shortening the Grand Tours, it's ridiculous. You can't be done. And that's why it makes it so special, is because it is that hard, because it is that easy for a team to be devastated and lose their $1 million rider like Enric Mas last year at the Tour de France. I understand why he wants to have replacement riders, but it can't happen. Let's just say we're sitting on the Chesterfield and again, we're watching where Enric Mas crashed out, Movistar's replaced him, but now they've replaced him with a guy, what, he's racing for general classification, but he hasn't raced the first week? Okay, so then the organizers will say that replacement rider can't race for the general classification. Well, what happens if we get a breakaway of 5 riders up the road and all 5 of those riders are replacement riders that aren't a threat on general classification? Now the GC teams are going to go, well, we don't have to work today because we don't even care about those 5 riders up the road. And it means other teams have to go to work if they want to win that stage. So it changes the chemistry of the race and allows the race leader's yellow jersey, whoever that may be, if you have 5 riders that are replacement riders going up the road, that yellow jersey gets a rest that day. So now if you're racing and you're second on general classification or third and you're trying to find all kinds of strategies of how to make the rider who's wearing the race leader's yellow jersey and his team get on the front, work hard, now all of a sudden it's all blown because 5 riders going up the road are replacement riders that aren't a threat on general classification. Or the most ridiculous story would be they are racing on general classification and they didn't have to do the whole first week, right? I mean, sometimes when you look at people's perspective, it's just all is skewed, okay? A Grand Tour is not 1 week. A Grand Tour is 3 weeks. That's why winning the Giro, winning the Tour, winning the Tour of Spain is so remarkable because it is a Grand Tour and it's 3 weeks long and anything can happen at any moment, and why as fans love to tune in. whether the drama is going to be high or whether the drama is going to be caused from crashes. I love the sensation of it. That's what makes cycling so beautiful. Now, to get back onto what I was talking about to begin with this one project, would I like to see 250 million euros come into the cycling world and bring some kind of different drama? Sure, I would love to see that. But I don't want to see Grand Tour shortened. I don't want to see replacement riders in a Grand Tour. And I certainly don't want to see where all 4 of the best riders in the world, if we're talking about this next coming season in 2024 that's already started, I don't want to see them racing together at every race. I love the drama that Jonas Vingegaard wins Trino Adriatico, that we see Tadej Pogacar win the Giro, that Primož Roglic, maybe he wins all 3, he wins Paris-Nice, he wins the Basque Country, he wins Dauphiné, and then Remco Evenepoel, maybe he wins over in Algarve. All 4 riders come into the Tour de France and merge, and we're not exactly certain where everybody's form is. That's the drama. That's the enjoyment of sitting on the Chesterfield and watching that big 50-inch flat screen TV and wondering what is going to happen today. And the drama of the Grand Tour of something as big as the Tour de France when they get into the mountain stages. And we all know Primož Roglic can crack because we've seen it in 2020. We all know that Tadej Pogacar can crack. We saw it last year. Remember that individual time trial from Jonas Vingegaard? We've seen Tadej Pogacar beat Jonas Vingegaard. We haven't seen Remco Evenepoel really beat the other 3 guys in the Grand Tours. I know he won the Volta a España against Primož Roglic after he crashed out, and I know he was wearing red when Primož Roglic crashed out, but there's still drama. He hasn't really beaten them if they crashed out. So when we start looking at the 2024 season and you read all these ridiculous articles about changing the whole history of the sport and changing it up, I don't know if it's a good thing if you change it up. I like it the way it is. I like to see more glitz, more glamour. I'd like to see better cameras and more cameras in the race. And I would occasionally like to see all 4 maybe meet up once before the Tour de France. I'd be happy with that, but they don't need to meet up at every race to keep me happy because I love the drama that they haven't met up, but they have all 4 won races before the July of the Tour de France starts here in 2024. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Maybe you like my take on it. Maybe it's just a different take. Maybe it's something you can explain or talk over when you're on your club ride and it keeps you interested in the sport. Either way, like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next edition real soon.